Welcome to Just the Facts. This is episode number 22, Bob.
22.
22 episodes. And I'm sure the people listening right now have listened to all 21
Well,
previous.
of course they have.
Of course they have, because now we're on episode 22. So, what?
I just want to apologize for
He's
the
gonna apologize.
delay in between sessions. Life gets in the way sometimes, and did this time. So thanks for joining us once again, and we apologize for the interruption in the frequency. How about that?
Sounds good.
All right.
Sounds good. I mean, not that we had to interrupt and had a little bit of a lull, but that happens from time to time, right? Even
It does.
in live shows that we have to take a little bit of a break, and that's okay. But we also had a special guest lined up during that break, and we had mentioned it in a couple episodes previously that, hey, we're going to have this special guest and got everybody, and now it's just us again.
Yeah, well, he spoke to us, and he will be happy to join us when we can reconvene.
We're not even going to tell who it was, are we?
No,
Yeah. Biden was busy.
he was.
Yeah, he was busy. We won't tell you who it was, but you can tune in to a future episode and we'll tease it again. But this is going to be a good subject because it falls right into line with what we were going to talk about with our special guest, and that was the industry changes. And a lot has happened, and we've mentioned this so many times. A lot has happened over the last 2.5 years. 2.5 years of this craziness. There's still some changes that dealerships have made. There's some things that have happened to really kind of force dealerships into making some changes. My question for you, and the theme of this podcast, is going to be, what changes do you believe are going to stick around? What are some of the changes that, you know what, this was a really good idea. Why didn't we think about this before?
Yeah.
We were forced into this, but this is really helping our business. So let's talk about the first part. And you and I have tried to figure out a way to talk about staffing. And how do we have that? Do we have that as a podcast? Probably not, but a piece of it. So let's take this opportunity to talk about the lack of staff in two areas. One is keeping sales personnel.
Yeah.
And then two is service technicians. Man, it's hard right now.
It is hard.
Like, the service drives are already packed, and then when you're down half your service techs, that becomes a real difficult process. So let's talk about that, the staffing part, and the changes that have been made, and how to start to correct that. Is there a way?
Yeah, there's always a way. It's not always easy, and there's oftentimes bumps in the road. But at the end of the day, the changes in the industry were coming anyway, right? If you look at the last 5, 6, 7 years, and dealers going to more of an online basis and less time spent at the dealership, all those things were coming anyway, right? So dealers were at least mentally preparing for it. Some of the more aggressive, bigger parties invest in future sometimes, so they were working on it. But even our independents knew that was the day coming when consumers just simply didn't want to spend as much time in the dealership. We're at the point now where millennials are the majority of our customers. We've been leading up to that for a long time, so they were preparing for that, for example, right? But with the advent of COVID and consumers either not being able to legally go to the dealership, deciding on their own not to go to the dealership, it's kind of become the norm. Will it change? Yeah, it'll go back, because going to the dealer is still the thrill, right? The feel of the wheel is still the thrill. But it definitely has changed. So when it comes to staffing models, the old hire a salesperson, plan on them to sell 10 cars, and how many you want to sell determines how many salespeople you need.
It's such a challenge right now.
Yeah.
That I still see banners saying we'll give you a $5,000 signing bonus.
Yeah.
It's just hard for them to get people.
Yeah, and part two of that is they want a different style salesperson, right? They want a salesperson who is more inept online. They want a salesperson who's more inept at just being a consultant rather than a hardcore salesperson, right? So as the older style salesperson, cradle to grave, 10-step sales process, build rapport, stay with them for hours, there's just a reducing amount of clients out there that want to do it that way, right? And again, that came from the millennial generation first. That was long before COVID. We started working on these things. So the point of the exercise here is what's going to stick around, right? Let's say COVID either goes away or at least gets reduced to just like the flu, and we go to somewhat normal. The staffing model is going to stay reduced because when you look at overall expenses, employees are the expense, right? The health plan, the all those things. So the more efficient you can become with less staffing model, ROI is higher. It's just business basics 101, right? So that's going to stick around. How low can you go? Depends on your store. If you're 100% online store without a lot of bricks and mortar, right, as we have growing numbers of them, then you can go with less of a staffing model because the amount of time spent physically with the consumer is greatly reduced. So through it all, dealers are going to find and have found and are already working on models with less sales staff, right? It was always thought that since they're commission anyway, they're not really an expense. That was salespeople talk, right? Mm-hmm. There's always expense. So without question, the reduction in staff is going to stick around. It's faster, it's smoother, it's more profitable. So absolutely that's going to stick around.
So that's the sales side, right?
Yeah.
And I had mentioned the service side. Yeah. So you really can, if you wanted, and I don't know how many average customers a service department's going to have, but it's, it's probably 100 a day for a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
At least. And so you don't really want to scale back there. It's hard to get those service technicians and all. I mean, I was due for an oil change. I had booked it online. And reputable dealer in town, and I got there to my appointment, and they're like, "We're sorry, we're not doing oil changes anymore." It's like, what?
Yeah.
We can't. We don't have the staff. We don't. We're so busy. We're so packed. We could try to fit you in, but we're talking about maybe 3 days to get an oil change, and so that's alarming. And so I don't think we're here to give an answer to how to deal with that, but that is still the question. It's still a pain point where we want to take in more service customers. We want to do that, but then how do you gauge that? Do you stop doing oil changes for regular customers and just do bigger ticket items? I mean, how does that work? How does that play out?
Well, here's the thing. If you go back 10 to 15 years, dealers didn't do oil changes, at least not as a business model. They didn't do tires, at least not as a business model. But 10 to 15 years ago, depending on who you are, you started doing that to draw traffic to your service department because that's the profit, right? Mm-hmm. So you brought them in for oil change and tires, just like bread at a grocery store, right? You go for bread, you come home with a grocery cart. So it was getting customers used to and becoming loyal to, and a way to keep the new car customer, because the new car customer really for the first 2 or 3 years, all they have is oil changes and tire rotations. And we're trying to create that loyalty, right? We all know loyal service customer who bought it from you is in the 70-80% return rate. So that was the whole goal there. Part 2 of that is cars have become less dependent on mechanical repair. Cars last a lot longer. Oil's a lot better. Your oil change, which used to be every 3,000 miles, now is whenever we tell you to get it done. It doesn't even have a service interval, right? We have recommended. But every car sold now tells you oil life and tells you when to get the oil change and and it's been extended. So it's not the 3 times a year, 3,000 miles, whichever comes first, come in and we'll set the appointment. Let's set the next one for 3 months out. And if you need it sooner, let us know kind of thing. So the advent of cars lasting longer, cars needing different services. Look at the new cars, the electric cars. We don't even know what service they need, right? So how can you build your service department? We're working on it, but they keep changing those vehicles. The old Prius and the early models have nothing to do with a Tesla. So those kind of things are going to affect the service department too, right? As the cars became better and as the warranties became longer, I remember running the dealership, having meetings about, are we even going to have a service department? And if we do, are we going to be profitable? Everything's under warranty. And You know, it used to be a 12-month warranty. Now it's a 5-year, 6-year, 10-year powertrain, you know what I mean? And that was always the discussion. So dealers today are trying to figure out what kind of mechanics do I need, not just how many, right? What kind? Do they have to be electronically, right? Because with each passing year, cars become more and more electronic. Now they become more and more computer. So again, it went from nuts and bolts and oils and filters and air filters to electronic this, electronic that, electronic this, electronic. Now it's computer this, computer.
And more and more electric vehicles coming into the marketplace.
Exactly right. So that's the bigger challenge for dealers. Are they overrun business-wise? Yes, that's short term, right? That's short term. The long term is, what staff and model do I need, and what type of mechanic do I need? I still need my nuts and bolts. We still have cars coming in the tranny and the heavy line, what used to be called heavy line. But the new mechanic has a system, and they plug into the car, and they know how to read it, and they know what they're looking, you know what I mean? So that's the challenge, keeping up with technology with certified mechanics that can work on today's car. So, again, it's more than just COVID. COVID accelerated, but it was changing anyway, right? It's always been changing. It's been changing a lot over the last 20, 25 years. It's accelerated even more with the push for electric vehicles.
So let me put myself into the consumer's shoes, right?
Yeah.
So as a consumer, and my story about they don't do oil changes anymore, isn't that kind of short-term thinking? Because here's the reality with me as a consumer. Like, I'm not looking at the business model of the dealership.
Yeah.
I'm not looking at what they're doing, and I'm not looking at COVID. I just want an oil change in my Jeep.
Yeah.
Right. And so I go there and they say, we don't do them anymore. I don't want to do business with them. That's just plain and simple. Like, I'm a loyal customer. You're the nearest Jeep dealership to me. You're going to force me to go down the street because I had an appointment and everybody's full. And I understand that there's a lack of technicians, but the reality still is I want a place where I can stay loyal. I want a place where I can bring my Jeep and I don't have to have someone tell me that, well, if you don't have any warranty work that's due on your car, if you don't have something that's major that's going on, we're not going to do your oil change. Like, I don't want that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going back there. And that's just the reality, you know. And I know people are like, well, why would you go to that? Well, because it's not convenient for me.
Yeah.
So what do you do in that case is you're looking at consumers that really are going to be turned off to it, because we're trying to keep customers for life at our dealerships, right?
Yeah.
You and I preach that message all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, do everything you can to keep that customer loyal, but they just lost one. So what do we do there? And I don't know how to answer that.
You have to
I'm not trying to, like, you know, throat punch somebody here on this, but this is a reality that I experience, and I like to bring those in.
Yeah. So what dealers are doing, and again, it's a change in the business model. You know, 15 to 20 years ago, everyone was coming out with quick lube. They even marketed the quick lube name and all those things. But dealers just would take a lift or two and dedicate it to oil changes. So what dealers have done to help is to either add a separate building altogether for just quick lube, right? Or put in different style lifts so that it's quicker, a drive-through lift rather than a lift your car up. Mm-hmm. So what they've done is they've literally opened up parts of their buildings. The existing building opened up a wall as a drive-through, and, you know, so they can technically, statistically get it through faster, right? It takes time to pull it in, put it on a lift, raise it, lower it, do all those things. So if you can just pull over a pit and keep running them through, you can line them up out the door and keep running them through. But that's money, that's investment, right? So dealers have shied away recently, to your point, from doing it because they only have so many.
And I understand.
They only have so many mechanics, and they only have so many lifts. And right now, people are investing a lot of money in their cars because the shortage of inventory. So they're trying to make their cars last longer. So all of a sudden, the average ticket per dealer is higher. And to capture that money, They would rather do that ticket than an oil change ticket, and that's what you're running into currently.
Yeah. And I think, probably the best practice and what I wish would have happened in this situation, and I'll probably go back there and just have a discussion with them, say, I want to stay loyal and here's what's happened. Can you make any changes? That's just me. But I think looking at it, I think if you're out there and you can't do oil changes, like, hey, DJ, like, come on, man, like, give us a break. We just can't do these. Just have some communication to the customer, like explain to them the reasons why. And you probably should shut off your online scheduling to have people as they come in, because they're going to be frustrated, and it's frustrating. And I think we all understand it, but as a consumer, from a consumer's perspective, we can jump in and we could be all in with you there and understand, as long as we're being communicated to. And that's all we're going to say on that. Just communication is always golden in these situations, especially when we're going through some hard times, and they'll understand. My point is, just to kind of wrap it up on this theme, is that the communication does work. And I think there's that we need to make sure that, we're communicating back to the customer. So off of that, some other changes. You had mentioned at the beginning about this online stuff that's happening, and more online. There's more and more groups and dealerships doing a lot of transactional stuff online, with contracts and DocuSign and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. So how much of that do you think will stick around? You just briefly mentioned it, but maybe we dig in just a little bit here and spend a few minutes on that trend. Is that going to stay? Is that going to get even more so online? Because the customer, there's a lot of them that still do want to come into the dealership, but if they can save 3 hours by doing stuff online before they come to the dealership, maybe that's important to them.
It is. And will that grow? Yes. Will it continue to grow? Yes. But that's a longer growth period. It's not a short hockey stick, as you call it, right?
Yeah.
So right now, the total online business model, everything done online, at least it's marketed that way, is minimal. When you look at the total sales in the country, it's minimal, right? At its peak, during COVID, during shutdown, during all that stuff, it only reached 15, right? So is it the future? Probably. How much of it? We don't know. And here's why we don't know. Consumers, even millennials, tell us they still prefer to go touch it, feel it, smell it, drive it. They like the experience. It's a big deal, The closest thing you can equate to is buying a house. You can buy a house 100% online, but most people still want to get the feel. They still want to walk it. They still want to feel the gut. They still want to feel good about the purchase. A car is a big deal, right? We're in the business, so we tend to just make it commodity and number this and number. To a consumer, it's a big deal. It's a moment in a life, and they want that moment to be special. So can you order it online? 100%. Can you do business online? 100%, but it's not the same. So that's why we don't know as an industry. Over time, will that go away? Probably. How fast? We don't know. Because if you remember, when we were doing the diagnostic for millennials, we knew upcoming they were going to take over the business, right? The word on the street was they don't want to come in. They hate dealers. They don't care what they buy. They don't care what it looks like.
Right.
Well, guess what?
Yeah. They're there.
It's just human nature, right? Yeah. It's a big deal. And so everyone's just guessing. Will it grow? Sure, it'll grow. Don't know how much, don't know how fast. Tesla's hoping it does a lot, right?
Well, sure.
Vroom's hoping it does a lot.
Well, sure.
Carvana's hoping it does a lot, And all those are respectable, and all those are doing well. Industry-wide, don't know.
Yeah, and we get that asked to us a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Like how is that going to work? And I like how you said it's like, we don't know for sure.
No one knows for sure.
No one really does. I mean, there's experts out there that have opinions. We've got our own opinions, but that doesn't mean they're going to come to fruition. That doesn't mean that they're going to last and actually stick with that. So there are some other changes that have taken place, right? Just a couple. Do you want to talk about those, or are we out of time?
Well, we're at
because he's like looking at the clock. Like those of you that are listening, you can't see him looking at the clock, but
I
those
know
of you
you're
watching
excited. We haven't done
may
this in
have
a
seen
while.
his eyes go. But as consumers are looking at the overall dealership experience,
Yeah.
right now, and this may change when someone listens to this in 6 months, but there's a lot of stuff happening that's driving consumers with high prices of vehicles and high fuel prices right now. That is a pain point for the consumer, and even higher interest rates. So just real quickly with those three subjects, high, and high, but high prices, high in the vehicle, gas prices, and then just the whole experience in itself. There was a third one I just couldn't remember, so I stalled.
Well, here's the thing. What's high? 2.5%, 4%, 5%?
Interest rates, that's what it was, yeah.
Well, here's the thing. That's over the last 12 or 18 months, that's considered high. That was considered low.
Exactly.
So that's a constant. Here's the part we don't know. The part we don't know is the inflation effect on everything. That's what all of a sudden came out of left field, right? Everything you hear, everything everywhere is talking about inflation. And legitimately, cities are at 11, 12, 13% inflation rate over the last 90 to so. That's a gut punch. That's the part we don't know. The fuel, we've all been here before. We've been less than $2, and that's when all the trucks sell. We've been at $4, and that's when all the 30 miles to the gallon in the electric vehicles sell. It goes up and down all the time.
Yeah, it does.
So dealers are resilient. Dealers went from government shutdown and found a way to be in business and be profitable, right? The only thing we have to work on in the immediate term is the sensitivity to the customer coming in under stress. That's the part that changed.
So a little empathy.
A lot of empathy. Mm-hmm. A lot of empathy and not a whole lot of selling is really what it's going to take. And that goes back to the new kind of salesperson, right? You don't want to take a person who's on stress, bring them in and shove them in a sales process. You need to sit them down, talk to them. Everyone on this call knows what we're talking about, but that's the critical part right now. Not the interest rate, not the fuel prices. It's a combination of stress that the consumer, we just came out of being locked down for 2 years. Now they're just getting their feet wet and excited. And, you look at vacations and all that, everyone's going crazy because they've been locked in for 2 years. People are worn out, and that's what dealers today have to account for. The nerves are shot, the stress is high, they're tired, and they're just trying to have fun with life again. That's what you need to remember.
Yeah, and if you got a top 5 things that you look for in a new candidate to hire as a salesperson, make sure somewhere in that top 5 is empathy, because they're going to need to show it to folks that are out there and put themselves in the customer's shoes. So that's all we've got. Shoes. That's all we've got for today. That's episode number 22. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to Just the Facts.
Take care, everybody.